Hello, welcome in everyone to episode 7 of the Batcat Beat here on the Kentucky Sports Radio YouTube channel. My name is Daniel Hager, the Kentucky baseball beat writer for KentuckySportsRadio.com, joined here by our good friend Derek Terry and Jonathan Bruner, the baseball writer for the Kentucky Colonel. Guys, how are you guys doing after a really, really fun weekend?
Doing great, Daniel. As always, happy to be here and happy to talk a little Lexington regional victory today with you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great to be here and just excited for not only this past weekend, but what's to come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Kentucky wins their second consecutive Lexington regional and what was really a really fun weekend. None of the games really ever seemed like they were in jeopardy of losing. They outscored their teams 21-9, and Western Michigan scored 8 of those 9 runs. And that game never even felt like UK was really in jeopardy of dropping that game. It got a little hairy, but never really in danger. But just it was a really fun weekend from my eyes. The third game kind of got off to a rough start with that rain delay. I know we were just big chilling up there in the press box for a while, just watching the Yankees game and just piddling around. But it was really cool to see the fans show up the way that they did. And just think next weekend is going to be like that crowd on crack because we had Railbird this weekend. The rain didn't help. Next weekend's apparently supposed to look really good weather-wise. No Railbird, but just a really fun weekend. I'm very glad that they did not dogpile when they won that third game. I know we were discussing that. We were like, I really hope that they don't dogpile. It should be a business as usual. But just some quick thoughts from you guys on the weekend before we dive into these individual games.
Jonathan, you can go and start. You were out there covering it. I'll let you start.
Yeah, I mean, it was an insane environment to be a part of. Just kind of you could feel the postseason in the air all the way from game 1 all the way till last night. And the crowds were extremely impressive. Just sitting there wearing that rain like they did yesterday. You just saw umbrellas up, people not even moving in the concourse until the lightning kind of caused some people to move once they were asked to. But when that first kind of just monsoon rain came, you just saw the umbrellas go up, and some of you people just in ponchos just chilling, just kind of wearing it. And I think that says a lot about what this team has how this team has earned the respect of the BBN, and just to endure that kind of rain just for a baseball game. It was super impressive to see that. But as far as on the field, I feel like Kentucky did what they were supposed to do. They were the favorite in all 3 of these games, and they played like they were the favorite. They took care of business, and I thought that was important too. The no dog pile, just kind of business as usual. They won the games they were supposed to win. So it should always feel like an accomplishment to win a region, because it is. But it should also be a business approach to it, as we expected to win this. We're not surprised that we won. And it seemed like that was the approach, and I thought that was very important. And I think it just I think the kind of downside to that, though, is it does raise expectations now even more than they've already been. Because, you can say, yeah, we're Omaha, but now as it keeps getting closer and, now the business aspect of your team is, yes, we expect to be in Omaha. So now your fans are going to expect that out of them as well. So they're going to have to kind of keep rising to the occasion, but they definitely did that this weekend. I think even some of the kind of question marks we talked about last week kind of got addressed, and it didn't really seem to affect them very much this weekend, if at all. Because just like Daniel said, none of these games, it never felt like Kentucky was really like on the ropes. They kind of flirted with disaster in that Western Michigan game. And then it even felt like yesterday, while the game was 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, it was 3-0 there for a while. It just didn't feel like that. It felt like Kentucky was in the driver's seat, and they would never even had a real grasp at losing it, even though if a couple pitches don't go Mason's way or some hits here and there, it could have been a completely different ball game. So I thought that was interesting. I just felt like Kentucky just had a grip on this regional from day one, and it was really just theirs to lose, and they certainly played like it.
Yeah, Derek, real quick, I'll jump in before you start. Jonathan, you touched on that where the score was only 3-0, but it felt much bigger than that. Indiana State's head coach Mitch Hannes after the game even brought that up. He was like, it's 2-0 and 3-0, but it feels like a 6-0 and a 7-0, especially the way that Mason was going, and then the game before that Trey was going. But yeah, Derek, I'll let you go on now.
No, I mean you guys summed it up pretty well. I was curious too as to how they would celebrate, and I think it was appropriate. I mean, for sure. The expectations this year are definitely different than the past two. You know, the past two in 2017, they never won a regional. I think that was an appropriate reaction that year. And then last year, it had been a little while, and it was a little different in the sense that, you know, they had to rally. They lost the second game that year, had to win 3 in a row to get there, whereas I think that's one of my main takeaways is this is a lot easier whenever you just go 3-0 and move on. I think when we left this podcast last Monday on Memorial Day, I remember thinking, I was like, man, I think my tone might have been a little too negative for how good this team's been. We spent a lot of time, at least I did, talking about all the things that could hurt them in a regional versus the things that they do very well. But for as much time as we did spend talking about the pitching, they were really – I mean, Friday, you guys mentioned, got a little – it was a pretty gutsy call to go with Nyman. But then, you know, he did fine for a few innings, and then some bad luck, hit some guys, walked some guys, had some bad luck on some – just kind of a weird inning there, the inning that Western Michigan scored 5. And then ended up having to go to Hogan, who was good. But by the end of Friday, you kind of wondered, like, you know, when you get an 8-0 lead, I think it was 8-0, right, what they had. It's like you don't really want to have to dip in the way that they did to some of this. But the way Pusser stepped up on Saturday and then Hagen out, where you only had to use 2, I mean, I think that really set the tone for – you look at last night, Mason wasn't – the line ended up looking good. I think the line looked better than maybe how he actually did watching the game because he was, you know, dancing in and out of danger for most of the night. I counted it up. I mean, he threw 49 balls to 57 strikes. I mean, he was kind of all over the place, but I think their coach might have called it effectively wild. I saw a few somebody did. I saw a few quotes. But even had Kentucky been in a situation where Cam came in and did great, struck out several guys, Novi came in before him, but they were still set up very well. So I think in a lot of ways this regional kind of played out the way you would have wanted it to. We never saw Ben Cleaver, never saw Johnny Hummel, right? Never saw Travis Smith. Like, they were in a spot that even had they lost last night, it might not have been as dire. And so I guess my takeaway from the regional is that for those years that they were, I mean, I don't think the program had ever won the second game of a regional. I don't know if they ever had, because I don't think this program has never gone 0-2 in a regional, but they'd also never started 2-0 until this year. So I believe that's right. I looked that up last week. So winning that second game was obviously huge and kind of set the tone. And maybe the only other big thought that I had last night is if I were an Indiana State fan, I think I probably would have been disappointed because I did not think they played very well last night. I thought they had several base running mistakes. The first run of the game for Kentucky came off of a sac fly because Emilian Petrie, they tried to pick him off, threw it down the right field line, and hands up a third. So you're getting a hole right away just off of, you know, something that simple pickoff. And then I think later in the game they threw one into center field. So I think this Kentucky team, you have to give it a lot of credit to where if you kind of give it an opening, it can kind of, you know, put the game away. And kind of how you guys were feeling, like the announcers were mentioning it too on TV, because they had a few cases where they had the tying run up at the plate. And it's like, you know, one swing, and this is kind of a different game. But I agree with you guys. It never really felt that way. It felt pretty safe the whole time. And a relatively, honestly, after Friday, a relatively low-stress regional, which is good for everybody involved if you're cheering on UK.
Yeah, that's what I was talking to Jonathan about this in the press room after last night's game, because he said that he voted Mason for Lexington Regional Most Outstanding Player. And I had the same sentiment you did. It's like it really didn't even seem like he had his best stuff last night. Like he was really dancing out of these jams. And like you said, 49 balls, 57 strikes. And it seemed like his command was kind of wild. He was bouncing balls at the plate. Even O'Brien was bouncing balls. And like I see this YouTube comment right here, which I did want to touch on really quick before we get into this. I thought Devin Burks was great behind the plate last night. Coach Mingione touched on this postgame. There were so many plays where Devin is either blocking these wild pitches or not letting him get by him. And then that one on the pass ball where he came right back up there, got it, and flipped it to Mason, I believe. And that run was like halfway down the line, but just because Devin got there so quick, he flipped that back and prevented that run. So, yeah, Mason got it done and continues to expand on his legacy. Really, really good to see those guys come out. But going back to that first game real quick, won't spend too much time on this because not much happened, but UK goes up 8-0. Dominic Nyman got the start, which I think a lot of people were really puzzled about. I know I thought that they'd go Poozer, but I mean, it worked out. So that's a classic Shannon Dawson. It worked, so you liked it. If it didn't work, we would have been like, oh, what a bad decision. But it worked to a degree. Dom's stat line, he went 4 and gave up 5 runs, but I don't think his outing was as bad as it shows in the stat line. I thought he was really cruising through 3. Kind of ran into some trouble. I think he only gave up 2 earned while he was in the game. But he loaded the bases, and O'Brien gave those runs up. But he was good until that point, and then Robert Hogan was the story of that first game, which we've talked about. This guy as down the stretch has been just nails out of the pen. He pitched 3 1/3, gave up just 2 hits, no runs, 4 strikeouts, and really, like, UK was on the verge of really like blowing that game. Western Michigan outscored them 8-0 or 8-2 over the final. I believe final 5 or 4 or 5 innings.
All of their runs came in 2 innings for Western
Yeah.
Michigan. They didn't score in 7 of the innings, but they scored 8 in the other 2.
Yeah, I will say though that 5th inning was like one of the most unlucky that I've seen for you, because I know some people were on social media and they were like, God, they should be making these are routine plays. But we see last night how good these guys are defensively. It's just those plays on that Friday game. It's like up the middle and just off the glove, and Mitch Daly, there's a runner running in front of him and just misses that. But comes in, they pull it off and open with a win. Just any quick thoughts from you guys on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I thought Hogan was electric. I mean, the way he came in, and he gave up the double right when he came in, but then after that, he was basically unhittable. I mean, and I kind of had the same sentiment about Dom. Once I kind of got to the box and got a lineup sheet, and I saw his name on there, I was like, that's a call. That's a call. But then once I kind of thought about it, I was like, if no matter what, he was going to start one of these games, I feel like it was the right call to go with this one. Because it was, kind of the least stress against the kind of the worst team you're going to play, seeding wise, Hey, so if he had to start one game, no matter what, I feel like it was the right call to go with this one. Because then you would have Trey for your winner's bracket game, and it played out in Kentucky's favor, of course. But I thought if you needed him to start one of these games, this was the correct one. And then, but of course, Hogan was just lights out. He kind of shut the door and didn't really give him a chance. I mean, I know in the 9th there, he kind of flirted with disaster a little bit there, but still, even then, it was just another one of those situations where it just felt like, yes, they could blow it, but like, no way they actually do, kind of thing. That's the feel of that game. And, I thought the offense getting out to a big start, 8-0, was impressive. It was disappointing to kind of see that it kind of bend away like that to where you did have to go to Hogan. Because if something didn't go your way the next 2 days, that would have been something you really looked back on as, man, you had a chance to get out of there without using any high leverage guys. You could have even maybe got a guy like Jake Titus, a freshman, some experience in that kind of situation, just, to eat the innings. So I think if it would have gone bad, that would have been something we would have looked back on as, wow, you could have had Hogan in a game, you lose game 2, but because you had to burn in game 1, that was a big deal. But that did not happen. So they held on, and it was nice to start 1-0. I thought it was very important, and Hogan was absolutely the story of that game.
Yeah, I think he's somewhat developed. That was his second longest outing of the year. He recorded one more out. He pitched 3 2/3 against Tennessee back in April. So, the last few years, the last 2 in particular, under Dan Rozelle, they'd really found guys who were multi-inning pitchers. Maybe they didn't start that way, like Tyler Guilfoyle from my memory. He did not really come in as a guy who was throwing like 4 innings, but by the end of the year, if he pitched, like, he was going to go as long as he could those days. Mason was that last year. I think Austin Strickland for a time was like that last season. I don't know that Hogan's quite reached the same level of those guys in terms of trust, but I think within this team with this bullpen, I think he's certainly the one that you're willing to give the longest leash. Hagenau's up there as well, but he was definitely, I think, a pretty big story. And I thought James McCoy, he came in slumping into this regional, and to get a home run, his first at bat, I think he ended up with 3 RBI that day. And I know he had a hit last night too. it was good to see him play a little bit better and to kind of set the tone right there from the start. And that'll be something they need to carry over. I mentioned it last week, just sticking with this kind of same 9 throughout, and how the SEC tournament might have been a time to experiment with that. I think now, in hindsight, I think this has probably been a good call to really just keep everybody in the same spots. There's not been too much tinkering. Like Ryan Nicholson is a guy that on this team traditionally, should he be the 6 hitter? I don't know. Like I think he's probably certainly he's had a better season than Devin Burks, but just in terms of where they seem comfortable, I think the staff has had a good feel for that with this team. And I think with McCoy, it's someone they were really excited about. I mean, last year, there were very aggressive things said about him last year. I remember he was like a projected top 75 guy at one point because he was one of the guys based on his age. He could get drafted last year. And I think he probably didn't quite have the season he hoped. And even this year, I mean, he's probably hitting around 230, 240 for the year. He's still not like crushed it, but they've stuck with him. And I think, maybe you saw that pay off a little bit that first game where, I think he put him up 3-0 on that swing. So gave him some confidence and going into the super, I like that they have the 9 that they know every time out. These are the guys you're going to win with. And, I feel like maybe James was rewarded. I think Kentucky's patience with him was maybe rewarded a little bit that first game.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on McCoy. I don't know how I didn't bring that up, but yeah, he was 0 for 21 until that game, and then comes out there and hits that homer and hits that double, and he almost made that stellar play and right at the wall, but just hit off his glove. Yeah, I know we talked about it last week. Maybe like we thought maybe a Patrick Herrera and right maybe would have been a move to make, but like you said, like James had a double in the second game, did that in the first game. It was really good to see that. I was really surprised that Indiana State lost Illinois in that second game, honestly, because like we saw when UK played Illinois, I didn't think Illinois was even that good. Like I guess their pitcher won them that game, but he wasn't even their ace. And so that's why I thought for sure that they would start their ace against UK in the second game, but they didn't do it. They started the Peyton Hutchings, who he had an ERA, it was around 8, and it's like 7.99, but he actually did pretty well. He pitched 5 innings, give up just 3 earned, but the story of that game was 2 players, Ryan Waldschmidt, who homered and doubled, the guy I voted for, Lexington Regional Most Outstanding Player, who I think really should have got it. Like, no slight to Ryan Nicholson. He was awesome as well. But I think he was just 3 for 11 at the plate with 2 homers. I think Waldschmidt was like 4 for 11 with a homer and a double and more RBIs. But whatever, Waldy continued to just dominate. Like, that guy just goes out every single game, whether it's with his glove in the outfield or leading off. And we've touched on it all season. That guy leads off and he sets the tone for everyone else in that lineup. And when Waldy's on, like, everyone else is on. But he was on, and then Trey Puser, who just has blown my mind how good that guy has become. 7 innings, 5 hits, 1 earned, 7 strikeouts. Just Illinois they had nothing on him. They totaled just 6 hits all game, 5 off of him. And then Ryan Hagenow, who pitched the final 2 innings, just gave up 1 hit, 3 strikeouts. He looked dominant as well. I think that's one of my biggest takeaways from the weekend, actually, is just how good the relief pitching was. I know there wasn't that much of a sample size because Moore went 6 in the third game and Puser went 7 in the second game, but Hagenow looked awesome and O'Brien looked awesome and Hogan looked awesome. And it really kind of solidifies just the big area where I thought that they were really struggling. But like we've said, it's a step down in competition. You play these SEC teams every single week, and maybe when you start playing in Indiana State and a Western Michigan and an Illinois, these guys are there. They show how good that they really are, and it shows how good the SEC really is. It didn't show in the tournament as Arkansas was bounced by SEMO and Vandy was bounced by High Point, but they are some talented teams. And Puser was great, relief pitching was great, and I think that was the most complete game that UK had played in a while. That Illinois win, because they went up early, controlled it the whole time. I know Illinois scored 1 in the 4th, but UK immediately went back in the top of the 5th and put that run right back on board. So just a really complete win that made me feel really confident in the Sunday game, which they ended up winning.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was super important for them to kind of get the game two monkey off their back, kind of, because it just never, they never were able to reach that game two win. And I thought that was a super important win. And I agree with the completeness of the win. I mean, Poozer was just spectacular. And he handed off to Hagenau, who just matched that to a T. I mean, Poozer just continues to just keep leveling up each and every time he's on the mound. You just kind of, like, for a while there, you almost expected, like, okay, he's off to a great start, but maybe he might level out just a little bit. But he's done the exact opposite. He's just continued to just rise to the occasion and level up each time. And it's been super impressive to watch. And I mean, I don't know where the starting rotation would be at if he never got inserted there. It's almost crazy to think about if that move never would have been made. Because, I mean, even when Mason and Dom were going through their struggles, he was kind of that rock on Friday nights where you knew you were at least getting a good start, and you all were going to have a chance to win the ball game with him on the mound. And then the offense, they just kind of picked up where they left off the night before, early lead. I mean, Waldy just continues to impress. Just that moonshot home run. I mean, that ball was just cranked. That was super impressive to see. And just kind of just overall, it was a really, really good win. And one that I think they needed to just to see and just to know that they can do it. And from a just confidence perspective, I thought it done a whole lot. And I like your point about how maybe the step down in competition maybe helped the relievers, even if nothing else, from a confidence perspective, to just kind of go out there, throw a couple scoreless frames and just see, okay, like, it is there. Even Novi yesterday, he got 2 outs, and then, the unfortunate error kind of knocked him out of the game because that was what the plan was. So, I mean, even he right there should have had a 3 down frame, and then you go right to O'Brien after that. So I was super impressed with the relief pitching this week, because it was kind of the talk of the town of the relievers can't get it done, they could be in trouble, and they didn't. But I thought the second game in particular showed off how complete this team can be and how they can just continue just to put pressure in many different ways and just kind of hold you down and not let you get back in the game.
Yeah, I was at Railbird for this game. So to follow the narrative, like the big takeaway was just to win a game two and to see that they only used 2 pitchers. So that was kind of the perspective I had on it whenever I didn't really have service, but my brother was keeping me updated, and saw that it was 4-1 in the bottom of the 8th, and I felt pretty good about it it was 4-1 at some point. I can't remember what inning it might have been, but I don't have much to add to that game besides the fact that, I mean, you really are just set up so well in these tournaments if you can take the first 2. But you've seen UK in years past. Like, it's not a guarantee they've had to win 3. They've done it. But in this particular region where, Jonathan was much more confident than you and I, Daniel, last week on how Kentucky would get to the percentage chance. But once they did win game 2, I mean, it definitely went up. I think it was going to take a lot for Indiana State, I think, at that point. Even though they were a pretty impressive team, I thought a lot of their numbers were very good. To shut them out was pretty incredible. I know I've moved on from Illinois to this Indiana State game. The only thing for Indiana State that I mentioned earlier, I think they would have been disappointed for not playing well. I saw one of the comments mentioning Burks maybe being some other reason for the base running. He wasn't involved at all in the 2 that I was talking about. They had a leadoff double, and the kid ran right into an out at third base, which killed an inning for them right away. And then, for as excellent as that play was from Grant Smith, and it was truly a great catch to be number 1 on SportsCenter, you have to score on that. I don't know what was going on over there. You at least have to force a throw. And if Grant catches the ball, does a cartwheel out there, and still throws you out, then, like, tip your hat. But to not be able to tag up and score on that ball is deep enough. Like, Waldschmidt should have had that ball. Like, that should have been Ryan Waldschmidt's ball out there in left field. You got to applaud Grant for the individual play, but you got to score a run on that. And who knows? I mean, if you don't tag him out at third right there to kill an inning, and if you get one across, I mean, I thought they hurt themselves in that game, and maybe it wouldn't have mattered. But in terms of the game pressure, like we were talking about, it was just never there for UK. I mean, it was a pretty smooth sailing night. And I think early on, Indiana State had some chances to not make it that way. So give credit to UK, I guess, that they found ways to stay out of that.
Yeah, I remember turning around to Jonathan in the 6th or 7th, and I was like, Indiana State has to feel so demoralized because UK was just making play after play. I think it was after Daly made like a backhand on a hard hit ball and threw the guy out to end the inning. But yeah, like it was a game of moments is what I kind of took away from that. Like Grant had that diving play up the middle to flip to Petria, turn that double play in the first or the second, whatever inning it was. And then, Grant makes that play, which is just was one of the craziest plays I've seen in person at a baseball game. I know Jonathan can attest to this. The whole press box was just like in a state of shock. And just like the runner on third was in a state of shock, they zoomed in on him and he was on third, like just didn't know what to think. And the base coach, I guess, did not help him out on that at all. But yeah, expanding on Mason like we did earlier, just dominant. And that dude has had his struggles this year, but he's been good. But there have just been some games, like I know twice against South Carolina really struggled, and just some other moments. But it's like when the lights get bright, this dude is just like he like flips that switch and turns it on. 6 innings pitched, 4 hits, 6 strikeouts, and he got through 5, and he'd thrown 89 pitches. And I was like, okay, like warm someone up, we'll get the pin up. But then he sends him back out there. And I know everyone on KS Board and then on Twitter were just like Ninja, like the 5th inning is always where like it seems like Mason kind of runs into that trouble. He did the same in this game, but he danced out of it. But then you send him back out there, and what'd he do? 3 up, 3 down.
Yeah, I think it was his only clean inning of the night, right?
Yes, and it was dominant. It was like I think he finished with 103 pitches or so. So he only threw like 13 pitches in that inning, just dominant, and got out of it. And then you bring in Cam O'Brien, who we've been tough on. Like I'll be straight up saying, like over the last month at least, we've been tough on him. There have just been so many. We go back to saying there have been so many of these high pressure moments where Cam comes out of the bullpen, and there's either bases loaded or 2 on, and it just always seems like he'll give up that 2 out, 2-run single or something like that. But dude was just dominant. Like struck out 5 of his 9 guys faced. Was really glad to see that for him, and then just finishing that out. And then Jackson Novy, like you touched on, Jonathan, we didn't see much of him, but that's the best he's looked also in a while. And so really gives me the confidence heading into the Oregon State matchup, which that game is final. So UK will be playing Oregon State next week. We don't know the dates or times for that yet, but I'm sure that'll come out. Is it Thursday through Saturday and Saturday through Monday? Is that the
kind of Friday through Sunday and Saturday through Monday?
Okay, yep. Yeah. I selfishly want the Saturday through Monday because I've got Hootie and the Blowfish tickets Friday night at Riverbend in Cincinnati. So I doubt that I'll be able to go to that. But just really, really makes me feel good for the weekend. Just complete series for the guys. Like you said, Jonathan was a lot more confident in it than we were, but just got the job done. And you guys see on the right-hand side the TCB logo. That's the Elvis logo for Take Care of Business, and that's what they did. They took care of business this weekend.
I wouldn't know what that was. I like that though, Daniel. It's a good touch.
Yeah.
Kind of back to the Indiana State game for a second, just kind of touch on a couple more points. I agree. I thought Mason kind of just did his thing, and just he's been so impressive. And I picked him as my outstanding player of the regional because I thought that, like, while it might not have been the best pitching performance of the weekend from a stats wise, because you had Cuts go CG the game before, and then you had the Illinois starter on Friday night went 8, I think, or maybe 8 in the third. I think.
Yeah.
And I mean, but I thought this one with the pressure on, Indiana State's trying to force a decisive game 7, with I thought his was the biggest pressure performance, and I thought he delivered. So that's why I thought he kind of earned that right to be. I thought it was the most impressive performance, even if it wasn't numbers wise, the best one of the weekend. And then I know we brought up Devin earlier. I thought maybe even more impressive than what he actually did in the game. His energy during this entire game was just second to none. It was after every single strike, you just saw that emotion, and then it strikeout out. I mean, you name it. He was just so just energetic, and you could just feel his energy throughout the entire game. And then, like, even in this picture after Mason got that huge out, Devin was right there with him, just kind of matching that energy, and he did it the whole game. And I know Coach Mingione brought up kind of, how he kind of maybe willed some guys into doing some things they didn't even know they maybe thought they couldn't do, and he did just that. So I thought from a leadership perspective, it was super impressive to see him not only doing his thing behind the dish, picking balls, keeping things in front of him, but willing the pitchers on the way he did, just with his energy. I thought that was super impressive to see. And because even if it wasn't maybe his best weekend at the plate, he had a really good game on Friday, and then kind of had the sac fly yesterday. But besides that, didn't really build on the Friday game as much. But I mean, still earned region team honors. But just seeing that energy in Game 3 from him, I thought was really, really cool to see. Just in general, and Mason just continues to impress, along with Novi and Cam. So I thought the pitching really kind of shut up a lot of doubters this weekend. I really thought they did. And even if Indiana State kind of maybe beat themselves in some ways, which I also think they did, kind of watching Grant's play again, you see the dude, he just panicked at third. He absolutely froze. He kind of it looked like he was going to tag up, and then he once Grant caught it, he took a couple steps off and then
just frozen.
Tag back up. I don't know what he was thinking, but he just completely locked up. So they definitely helped Mason in a lot of ways by, some self-inflicted wounds, but that's not to take credit away from what Mason did yesterday. It was extremely impressive.
You made a great point on Burks. Super engaged. I mean, every pitch. With Mason too, those are two guys, they've been in the program a long time. I mean, Devin's, this is his 4th year, and Mason's been here 3 years. And, last year, they just, it's a situation both had been in before. Mason closed out the region last year. Burks was catching that game. There's a lot of, I think, built up goodwill between the two of those guys just from having that battery mate for pretty much his whole career. I don't know if Mason, I guess he would have thrown to, Rubicable, is that his name? I can't remember.
Yeah, I knew it was something. Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah,
he was the catcher a little bit there in 22 before Devin kind of took that job and ran with it. So for most of Mason's career, that's been his catcher. So I don't think you guys mentioned. I didn't know this till after the game that Mason was sick as well. Did anyone mention that?
Yeah,
I know Tyler wrote a story this morning on that at KSR, but to be a little bit under the weather the day before and probably still not feeling great and just kind of gut it out. That's great. And you guys have it on there, Kentucky legend. I mean, he's got a chance this weekend if Kentucky takes game 1, because I'm assuming he's not going to start the Friday game. There's a world he might be pitching the Cats to Omaha. So I hope that that's the case for him. I mean, who else? You saw the numbers. Who else would you want up there in the postseason? He's not giving up a run to this point, and he's the kind of guy that I think you hope to have just a kid from Rowan County, Moorhead, to come out there and potentially get the Cats to Omaha. I think it would be a really nice story. Although I think we would all agree we don't really care who's on the mound when those 3 outs get recorded, as long as it's the good guys are moving on.
Yeah, you got to feel bad for Indiana State, 10th best RPI in the country, and then a team like Arizona gets over them and they get bounced in 2 games, don't even score a run. East Carolina bounced by Evansville today out of their regional.
Is that going to be the most lopsided super regional in college baseball history? I mean, Tennessee pretty clearly, I think, the best team. Evansville, a team that did I see Evansville finish 7th in the Missouri Valley, and they got in. Of course, they won their region. Yeah. That's an incredible story for those guys. They also have a former Cat, Brendan Horde, used to be on UK's roster. He's a catcher for Evansville, so he'll get to experience the supers as well, which I guess is a cool because I think he played at Dunbar, so a little local connection there. Good luck to them. That's gonna be tough. That's gonna be a tough assignment to go down to Knoxville, which I mean, in some ways though, guys, right? That's kind of if you earn the number 1 overall seed. I mean, I don't know how good of a shot ECU would have had either. What was disappointing about that region? It was disappointing, but it was also it worked out the way you thought it would. ECU's ace pitched against Chase Burns, but it was in an elimination game in game 2. And for Evansville to survive that regional was, probably the story of the NCAA tournament to this point, I guess you would say. But I got a feeling that's going to end pretty quickly in Knoxville next weekend.
Yeah, I would definitely say either that Evansville run or the SEMO or Arkansas. Yeah. Arkansas's disappointment. Before we move on, and I know Jonathan probably wants to speak, but people before the tournament started that were picking Arkansas to win the College World Series, I could not believe my eyes. They were multiple national people that were picking them, and I'm like, Hagen Smith isn't going to start every single game, right? Like, they got that first game and Arkansas scored 17, and I was like, wow, like the offense, like I've been talking all this bad stuff about their offense all season long. They didn't show up against UK other than that first game, but then you see those next two games and just bad, like really bad look for the league. Vanderbilt's in a different little category. I think they're a lot younger team, kind of on the come up, and then in Mississippi State, they're also kind of on the rebound. But Arkansas, just how disappointing is that? I know their fans were really loud before the tournament started and saying, Arkansas was a 2 seed in the SEC tournament, UK was a 3, so they're better or whatever. But UK showed them who was boss in the SEC tournament, and then Arkansas just goes out and lays an egg. But I think you wanted to say something, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, even speaking on Arkansas, the one start that Hagen Smith did have,
they lost.
Yeah, I mean, he got rocked a little bit, so that was really surprising to see. But I think it just goes back to the adage, just anything can happen. It's baseball's an any given day kind of sport, and I think kind of the selfish fan in me wanted to see Wake Forest and Tennessee in a supers. That would have been something awesome to see, but that's just not how it shook out. So, but Tennessee, they earned the 1 seed and they got a favorable matchup as they should have, And I think that kind of felt like kind of Indiana State kind of got punished by being in Kentucky, and then Kentucky didn't get rewarded for being a 2 seed. And, now they're going to have to deal with an Oregon State team that's certainly no rollover by any means, So it's going to be interesting to see how they, if they're able to rise to it or not.
Well, you do mention, you talk about the disappointments with Arkansas, Vanderbilt. Florida, I didn't think should be in the tournament, and they're up 4-2 right now with the chance to win the Stillwater Regional. So could be. I'm not ready to call this like Ole Miss level, like last team in, which they weren't. Obviously, we mentioned it last week. They weren't even among the last 4 in. They were safely in, apparently. I'm not sure if I'm ready to say they're like national title. You're going to run this all the way to the title, but still to get into a regional like that, I do think it shows the depth of the league. I mean, to have a team like that, because Oklahoma State's a very good program hosting out there, the spot they're used to having. And Florida I think it's still just in the 6, so they got a little ways to go to finish that one off. But if they were able to get to a super as well, it just kind of shows. I mean, you might have a few disappointments here and there, but there might be other teams within that kind of rise up.
Yeah, even LSU's playing North Carolina tonight, right? For the regional final. So it's just like these teams, like, there's no going away. But speaking of the super regional, here we go. UK will play Oregon State in the super regional. Like I said, the times and dates will be revealed at a later date. But the first home super regional in Kentucky baseball history. Really excited for that. We haven't really got to, since it just happened, dive into just some thoughts about Oregon State. So real quick, I've got this graphic I'll throw up in here. Some quick thoughts on the Beavers. Won the Corvallis Regional. They beat Tulane in the first game, beat UC Irvine in the second game. Then they came back, and they were supposed to play that game yesterday, but got postponed due to rain. So they came out today and got it done. But Oregon State is a sneaky good team. They were 18th in the RPI, and it's a big step up. You're in this next round, and it's a big step up from the teams that they're playing this weekend. 23 top 100 RPI wins. And Derek, you were just talking about Oklahoma State. They beat Oklahoma State in one of those early season tournaments. UC Irvine was top 30. Arizona hosted a regional. They beat them twice. Oregon, they were in the NCAA tournament. Just some really good wins. And then the guy that we're going to all learn all too well, which me and Derek as Reds fans really might learn about this guy in the next month or so, but Travis Bazzana, the number 2 overall MLB draft prospect. This dude's just a monster. Like, he's batting .419, 85 hits, 16 doubles, 28 homers, which top 5 in the country, 65 ribbies, which is top 10 in the country. So a definite step up in talent level, but should be a really exciting week at KPP next weekend.
So I was watching Friday night when Oregon State played Tulane, and Bazzana hit one 446 at 110 off the bat. So that was the first time I'd seen him live. I'd seen clips of him on Twitter pretty much all spring, but very good player. And I don't know a ton about Oregon State's team now. I know they're still searching for their first College World Series in the post-Pat Casey era. Of course, under Casey, they were, like my childhood. They went back-to-back. I mean, a great baseball program. And I think they won it. Was it 2019 when they beat Arkansas, or 2018?
Is that when Rushman was there? Adley?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe that was around that time. I know they've won one somewhat recently. This is a very, very good program that is trying to get back to the level that it's been in the past, and to be, a 15 seed. Like, I always think these teams are kind of dangerous in the sense that these are championship type programs that they expect to win. Going to Omaha is nothing new for Oregon State. There's an expectation, even if Pat Casey is not there, that's what you'll accomplish. And for UK, not to necessarily just focus on the Oregon State matchup, is I honestly, outside of Bazana and Gavin Turley, who will probably be a top 10 pick, or he'll probably show up in top 10 as a top 10 pick in the mock drafts for 2025. They have two very, very good players, as good as anyone you'll see in college baseball, really. For Kentucky, this is really the first time that they've had a super matchup in the school's history that, like, you kind of expect maybe to win a game. Like, you have it at home, or obviously is a big advantage, but last year against LSU, who turned out to win the national title, like, that was going to be really tough to go to Baton Rouge and win a game down there. Louisville, I think Kentucky was prepared for that Louisville series in 2017. I don't think they were, like, way outmanned there. Louisville had a great team that year. I think they just played a little bit better in those two games. But the point I would make is, in any of those four, I don't know if they've ever led in any of the games. They've definitely not, by the ninth inning, it felt like they had a good chance to win it. So that's kind of the next step. And by being a higher seed, this theoretically on paper, even though Oregon State will still be a very good team and this will be a difficult region, a super regional to win, in theory, this should not be a team as good as what Louisville was or what LSU was, obviously, last year. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. Like, can you play better in a super regional? Because I thought last year, and this is nothing against UK, like I said, LSU went on to win the national title. They were the best team in college baseball. But, like, I think you saw the talent level differential big time in that series in Baton Rouge. I don't think that that's going to show up as much as what it did last year, or shouldn't, I don't think. So it'll be a tough super, but this atmosphere that should be there next weekend. I got my tickets this morning for the whole session. So I do want to give a quick shout out. If it's a Friday, I'm kind of with you, Daniel, because you have a concert. Alma Mater, the Corbin Redhounds, are playing in the state tournament on Friday, and I will be going to that. So I want to support the old high school. And so I'm hoping that if it is on Friday, it's at least earlier in the day, because I know they played at noon against Louisville back in 2017. So I don't know. Perhaps the TV slots have changed over the years. That was 7 years ago. So I would imagine they're still pretty similar. So let's avoid, like, the 7 p.m. Friday night. Let's get it either on Saturday or Monday, or earlier in the day on Friday.
Yeah, that's a great point that I want to expand on real quick before Jonathan hops in. It just the attitude and kind of the feel of heading into this super regional from last year is just like a total 180. Because I don't know about you all, but, like, you see that UK is playing LSU, and it's like, like, you got to throw your hands up. It's like,
I mean, you're not going to see Paul Skeens or anybody like that in this series, where you kind of got to punt the game right away.
The lineup just all the way up and down. It's just like, and then you look, UK starting Ruben Church at DH. Like, nothing against Ruben Church, but it's just like the talent disparage. And then you have Tommy White and DH against him. It's just the feel is a lot different. The talent disparity I don't think is there. Bazana is probably the best player that will be there this weekend, and Turley as well. But after those two guys, I'll take a Waldschmidt and Petrie and Devin and Nicholson and Daly. I think I'm excited for it. What are some percentages? I know Jonathan loves his percentages of
should up it, Jonathan. Let's go a little higher this time.
Yeah. Chance percentages that UK pulls it off this weekend and heads to Omaha for the first time ever.
95%.
Oh,
here's why. Here's what I think. I think that the way we looked at LSU last year, and I think it was completely justified, was like the only shot of realism that we had was hoping and praying to whatever you believe in that LSU somehow got bounced before the Super. And, of course, that did not happen. So then once Kentucky won, it was like, wow, this is special. This is a great moment. But, like, what time we play next year? You know what I mean? That was kind of the way it was looked at, and rightfully so, and that's how it turned out. Once again, not to discredit that team, Kentucky's team last year, but they just ran into a buzzsaw that was Dylan Cruz and Paul Skeens, and it was just kind of one of those things. I think, if anything, not as wide of a gap, but I think it is kind of flipped a little bit this year. And Oregon State's looking at Kentucky like, wow, like, yeah, we are a couple of dogs, but they got a complete lineup, a complete pitching staff. So I think it's an interesting matchup, though, because I think that these teams are very similar in a way. It's almost like Kentucky baseball in the East is Oregon State baseball in the West, kind of how they play and with speed and power and kind of completeness in a way. But I think it's going to be interesting to see kind of, because like kind of just like the regional we talked about with some of these teams is these RPI wins. You look at Kentucky's and they still match up more impressively to me than Oregon State's best wins, and part of that's playing in the SEC and winning in the SEC, which is not easy, and they were able to make it look easy at times. But I mean, I think Kentucky rightfully should be favored in this region if, looking at, betting odds and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if I highly doubt they're even out yet, but when they do, I would not be surprised to see Kentucky favored to win this regional or win this super. But I mean, like I said, I don't think the competition gap is as wide as it was last year with LSU, but I think it is flipped a little bit this year in UK's favor, because I feel like on paper and from kind of the eye test from top to bottom, they are the better baseball team. And that's kind of goes into my vote of confidence that they are going to be able to get it done.
Yeah, just on that graphic, I forgot I added that. You can see in the top right corner just the home and away splits on these guys. 27-2 at home, which is awesome, but you see they're just 9-10 away from Corvallis. So I'll definitely be interested to see if kind of that lack of experience of winning on the road also kind of hinders them this weekend.
I know we don't necessarily love a potential Friday matchup, but Oregon State had to play today. They have to fly across the country. Like, are you maybe hoping a little gamesmanship that you play at noon on Friday, get as early as the time slot as possible to, they've had to be out there for a while, and I've not looked at their schedule. I don't know if they've played, how many games they've played on the East Coast this year, if any. I mean, I know those teams typically stay out there. Maybe early in the year they went somewhere. But yeah, the percentages, I'm going to stay like around 55. I kind of like that. I give Kentucky a better chance than not to win this super regional. I do think the crowd will make a big, like, if you give these fans like just any reason to like really get into this game, I think it will be a zoo out there. I think it will be great. One of the coolest things I've got to do in my life, which is really sad to say, because being a Reds fan, you don't get a ton of opportunities. I did go to Game 5 in 2012 when I was in high school, senior fall break. And the Game 5 against the Giants, like, I'd been to a bunch of baseball games at that point, regular season, been to a bunch since, and like nothing compared to being at a playoff baseball game. It was really incredible. And it's really sad that I don't know if they've even really played since then. But I just kind of compare that for as good as the atmosphere was last year for a regional, as good as it was these past few days, I think it could be even better. It should be better than that. I think there should be more people there. I mean, you have a chance to see Kentucky baseball in Lexington clinch a spot in Omaha, the pinnacle of the sport, something that's never done. I would encourage, if you have the means and you have the passion to go out there, they could use you. I mean, these players could use you. I've mentioned it all this year, and I ended up compiling some stats just to kind of see where Kentucky's kind of stacked up the last few years. Even like the blue bloods of the sport these past few years have had kind of this up and down, and that nothing is really guaranteed moving forward. And that this is like, I've followed UK baseball a long time. They've had the same tournament format since 1999. This is the only time they've ever been able to host a super. So you might not get this opportunity again for a long time is what I'm trying to say. So leave it all out there if you're a fan coming to KPP this weekend.
Who are you all starting in that Friday game?
Pooser.
Yeah.
I'm going Trey. I think you got to go Trey. I think what you do after that is kind of the question mark, because I think the easy answer is, of course, Mason, but like, what do you hold? Who do you hold for Game 3? Are you going to put the ball in Dom's hands with Omaha or season ending on the line? I think that's the grand question of who you go with on Saturday. I think going with Trey on Friday is almost automatic. I think you have to. But I think if it makes it, I mean, I would say the dream scenario would be Poozer to Mason to Omaha for Kentucky. But if that doesn't pan out, I think it puts them at a disadvantage in game 3 with whoever you decide to go with based on who you use out of the pen. Now, if, Mason and Poozer replicate these outings and go 7-6, then there's a good chance your pen's going to be in okay shape, pretty decent shape. But I mean, the uptick in competition could also really question that, because you look at some of the jams Mason got in against better teams, he might not get so lucky and they might not shoot themselves in the foot like Indiana State did. And that could change his ledger, quickly. Just like it could have last night, but it didn't. And then kind of looking at Poozer, he continued to roll. But once again, that uptick in competition could really play a role, and even just pitch counts, which could get him out a little earlier, which brings the pin in a little sooner. I think if anything, that could be the biggest effect, whether you don't necessarily see the lines jump up to 6 or 7 earned runs, but kind of that same kind of thing. But it's going to be interesting to see the pitching decisions post Friday of if they decide to hold Mason for that what if game 3, or if they decide to kind of go chips in the middle of the table. Here we go. So it's an interesting kind of school of thought of how you want to approach it, and just kind of it's going to be interesting to see what they do in the end.
Yeah, I'd just say that's why Nick makes the big bucks. Like that's a really big decision with just this history riding on it. Like you see, we're in that media room yesterday, and you have the front of the stadium in Omaha on the walls, and you're just looking at that, and it's like it's a real possibility now. Like all season long, I've been so pessimistic, like cheering for these guys and covering these guys, but I'm like it just seems like something always happens. Like they're like last year, they're having this dream season, but then they run into LSU in 17, Louisville in 06, they get bounced in the first round. But this year, it's just like Omaha it's right there for the taking, and it's really been a cool thing to witness, and it's going to be an exciting weekend. Before we get out of here, I threw something up on KS Board, asked for some questions, so we'll have a few questions in the show. This first one, I want to ask Derek, 'cause this is probably more geared towards him. This is from at Barry Justin on KS Board. He said, with Coach Mingione having shown 2 years in a row that he can put a great team together via the transfer portal, do you foresee Kentucky baseball keeping similar success in the future?
Yeah, I think the big thing after this year, though, is just the sheer number of players they're going to lose. I mean, everybody in the lineup is either graduating or draft eligible. Not to say every single guy will sign, but I think you probably, from what I've heard, I'm thinking they're operating as if no one's going to be back. And pitching's the same way. They're really going to load up through the portal and with the staff. But, yeah, I mean, I think you have to give a lot of credit to UK staff UK's coaching staff for they compete in a league that, like, it's really is a lot like SEC football. Like, a lot of these teams care very much about winning college baseball games. And the truth is that's not always been the case here at UK. The NIL budgets, they're seriously like the Tampa Bay Rays, competing in the AL East against the Yankees and Red Sox, LSU, Tennessee. These teams spend a lot to win, and they have been so good through multiple staffs, really. I mean, they lost a few key guys last year. Will Coggin went to Georgia. Jake Scott, who was a big part of the recruiting operation, left as well. And Austin Kuzno came in, and he's the reason they got Mitch Daly, his connection. Mitch has played a big role this year. So it'll be a little different. I'm very curious to see Kuzno in kind of his first year. Nick Amorati does a lot too. They all do. I mean, it's a small staff compared to a lot of these other sports. Like, I know their portal operation, or at least what it was a few years ago, and it is like there's a lot of work. They got to grind through a lot of names that go through the portal. And their ability to kind of sort through it and figure out the guys who will be good fits has been good. The area I think everyone will want to see is, do you end up with a little bit higher caliber player this year after this run right here, a potential Omaha team? Do you have to, maybe if you're taking a 12, 14-man portal class, are you still taking 9 or 10 from small schools, or maybe can you get it more like 6 from small schools, 8 from Power 5s? I don't know. We'll have to see. That might be down the road. But to answer the question, the evaluation process, yes, I think that will probably stay the same. I think they will get guys this year that on paper, whenever you first look at them, you might not think much. And then this time next year, maybe we're talking about how good of a season they had. Nick Lopez was not a highly thought after. He committed pretty late, actually, in the portal process. This was not someone who committed very early and who was very coveted. Tyler Guilfoyle is another one who probably had one of the best seasons of any reliever in Kentucky history. He came from Lipscomb. There are several others. You have Mitch Daly and Jackson Gray the year before. Both guys who struggled at their previous school came to UK, played much better. There are real success stories to sell. So it'll definitely be a big piece, and I think next year they'll be so young that they might try to add in some more depth with kind of safety option, just because there is so much more data on college players. There is less risk. There's still risk if you're signing a guy from. I didn't even mention Walshman. He's gonna be a first-round pick, and he played at Charleston Southern. So there's still more data on those guys. It's a little safer, if you want to call it that. But the high school piece is still important. But yes, it's a long way to answer the question. But there's really nothing with the process that should change, unless, and there's a chance, whenever you do this 2 years in a row, what Kentucky has done, other schools are going to take notice. And I think it'll be a big thing to try to hold on to this staff this year. And I think they're going to have to pony up a little bit to do that. So that will be, I think, the immediate focus when the season is over, is because it gets a lot tougher if you lose a pitching coach or you lose one of your assistants. If you're trying to work with the man down, that'll be a pretty big priority, I think, for Mingione.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on the guys like a Lopez. If this staff doesn't have your trust already, they should. Even last year, a guy like Hunter Gillen from Longwood comes in and he excels. And Ryan Nicholson comes from Cincinnati, and he wasn't even the guy that we were excited about at first base. We were excited about Stephen Klein from Samford, who won the Gold Glove last year, and then he's all of a sudden he runs out of eligibility, and now Ryan Nicholson's out here, and he hit his 20th home run of the season yesterday, and that's the most by a player since Mingione has been here. And I don't know, it's like they've really set themselves up as a transfer portal paradise, and I'm really excited to see what they can bring in and kind of see it like you touched on, if they can kind of reel in some of those bigger fish from these Power 5 schools. But if they're plucking these guys from these lower schools and they're ending up working like they are, I'll just let them keep cooking. So
yeah, I think to kind of add to that, I think this year was the perfect class. This was 10 out of 10. There was all hits, no misses. I think it, for the most part, I think it's interesting to see when kind of that big miss occurs, kind of when you maybe bring in somebody from a smaller school and then they play like they're from a smaller school. They don't really take that next step like we've seen so often. Because, with anything, it may work 99% of the time, but there's going to be that 1% where there's a miss. But I think even looking at the depth, that if this happened this year, you had a guy like Eli Small or Patrick Carrera or Caius Gargett. He played really good when Grant went down. They've also got some in-house guys who will be able to kind of step in too. So I think right now they have a great balance, and then I think the past 2 seasons of success and kind of the reputation that Kentucky has got nationally of being so tight-knit and such a close family, that's going to attract those bigger names, I feel like. And I think you will start seeing Kentucky at least in the mix for most of these big names, kind of like they are in basketball in a way, like how they are in the mix for all these, really impressive names who hop in the portal. I think Kentucky baseball will start becoming one of those places where they're in the mix and probably even land a couple of those guys in the future. But the success to this level, I think maybe might be hard to replicate just because this has been the perfect season in its own way. So the success to this level might be hard to replicate, but making noise in the SEC and making runs in the tournament, I don't think it's going to be hard for this staff to replicate at all.
Yeah. Yeah. One more question before we get out of here. Another one that I like from our good friend, Adam Luckett. He asked, do the fans rush the field if Kentucky wins this weekend?
Does that ever happen for baseball?
I cannot think of it. But I think it's kind of hard though, right? They've got the netting set up all the way down the lines, and
yeah, you got a little drop off if you're jumping from the outfield too. It's a little bit of a long way down. Oh, someone needs to ask Mitch this week because Mitch was at Oregon State before he came, so this will be not only that, but what's the fine if your fans storm the field for I don't know if someone has an answer to that. They have to go to the rule book, ask Greg Sankey how much it's going to cost. No, I do think it'll be an incredible atmosphere. Unless, the situation you want to avoid is that you just don't play well and you never really give the fans a chance to get into the game. I think there will I don't think it's going to work out that way, though, and I'm pretty optimistic as to how this weekend will go. So it's a good question from Luckett, but I'm going to say no. Ultimately, no, they don't storm the field, but I would like to. I think Mitch would be happy paying that fine. The extra revenue they're going to make really for the first time ever is going to help. And I do hope, going back to what you were saying, Jonathan, to kind of put a bow, be the last thing to say for the pod. Whenever you start to have success like Kentucky's had, I do think it will introduce you to a higher level of player. So the balance you always run into, I think Mark Stoops probably had this at a point. Although football's a little different, like you just have to have dudes, and you do too in any sport at a high level. But they formed an identity as a program, and they kind of are like an underdogish type program. Ultimately, to kind of reach the next level, and you might see it show up at some point in this run. To beat the best teams consistently, you do need pros, and I don't know how many this team has. I think Oldschmidt has a pretty good chance. I think Petrie has a chance. Maybe Travis Smith eventually. I know scouts still like him. Those are really the top three. Everyone else is kind of just solid college players that might have a chance to have a shot at pro ball, maybe not. So how do you balance keeping your identity versus adding, a level of talents you kind of have to succeed? Maybe that comes from high school in a few years, that because these high schoolers that are freshmen right now see what Kentucky's done, maybe you get your foot in the door with some more of those guys. Maybe it won't necessarily come from the portal. But I do think the natural progression is, you succeed on the field, that leads to better players being interested in your program. But I do think, too, with the portal, so much of that is just NIL. And I don't know how deep they're going to wade into that. I don't really believe many of the numbers I hear anyway throughout college sports. And with baseball, I have no clue kind of where they are. I know that this team in particular, there might be a few who have who have had some money thrown their way. But in general, it's not been that way. And it's just been a good, tight-knit group that, kind of what Jonathan said, it's kind of been a perfect storm that I don't know will exist every year. But that will be a challenge, I think. And I think it will be a big topic for the program moving forward, kind of how you build off of this.
Yep. Definitely been a perfect storm. Awesome show. It's been an awesome week, awesome season, and we've got at least one more week of games left. Hopefully another week, and then we'd hit the road to Omaha. So really exciting times. Real quick before we get out of here, just kind of let people know where they can find you on social media and elsewhere. I know Jonathan he's been struggling to change that username. I think by next week's show, Jonathan will have a new on X. So look forward to that.
All I can say at the moment, Twitter has not been friendly with the change the name, so working on it there. But you can find all my work on kycolonel.com or at kycolonelsports on Twitter, and then my Twitter for now is J239965 for now. Hoping to have that changed by next week, though.
That's great. Yeah, at Derek S. Terry. Mostly just reactions these days from me on things. So follow if you want. But you mostly hear me here. And like you said, Daniel, hopefully next week you're figuring out how you're going to get to Omaha and all that good stuff. You too, Jonathan. I as an old Kentucky Colonel rider myself, I got to say it's probably not in the budget for it's not something you planned for in the the meetings before the year, the trip to Omaha. I don't know if that ever came up whenever I was there. So either way, I hope you find a way, though, if they do make it, because that's kind of a once in a lifetime. Hopefully not. Maybe not moving forward. But to this point, it would be kind of a once in a lifetime thing. But these two do a great job. If you guys, they've consistently put out coverage all year. I'll read the things that get put out. And so they're great resources. And to be young, this is an exciting time, I think, for you guys to cover the program and be here at a time that, when I was in college, it was just trying to make it to the tournament. It was a pretty good season. So good for you guys that you got to experience this and cover a super regional in Lexington. That's incredible. That's great.
Yep. Really looking forward to the weekend. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and hopefully we will be back on Monday or Tuesday with a celebratory episode 8 of the Backcat Beat. So we will see you then. Thank you.